So.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Mark Hanitka, and this is our August UAGC Honors Roundtable on global issues, hosted and facilitated by our very own Dr. Clifford Blizard, who is going to share with us the wicked problem of climate change and why it is so important and how it relates to and affects all aspects of our lives and society. And after the formal presentation and discussion, we will stick around. If anybody here is not already enrolled in the program, we will be happy to answer your questions and help you decide if the UAGC Honors Program is the right fit for you. But we welcome everybody who is attending live and everybody who is watching the recording. I will turn it over to you, Clifford.
Sure. And before I get started, do we have any folks that are here that are thinking about honors but not currently in it, just out of curiosity? And are most of you in honors? Okay, folks are thinking about it, and some of you are in honors. Fantastic. So anyway, everyone is more than welcome. Fantastic, Stephanie, and great Angelina, forgive me. Cool, Julia. It's a fun place to be. We'll talk more about that later this evening, but wonderful, wonderful. And we have a small group, which is great. We probably won't do breakouts. Yes, Angelina. In fact, I think you're in my Honors 270 course that's just getting underway. In fact, I'm pretty sure you are. So welcome. In fact, I should have posted this announcement there, and I didn't think to do that. No worries, Mark. Stay safe there. As we were talking earlier, it's been some pretty amazing storms in the east. So my name's Dr. Clifford Blizard, and in just a minute, I'm going to launch into about, I don't know what it's going to be, 20 or 30 minutes of presentation / conversation. My goal will be to just introduce a little bit about climate change. I think it's a topic that doesn't really need any introduction anymore. I'm certainly not going to drown you in statistics about it. There's plenty of those out there. There's plenty of those scary pictures. You've all seen the polar bear on top of a little ice floe adrift at sea. I don't need to show those pictures, but I will talk about some of the latest news, latest being 3 days ago. And I will then talk at length about wicked problems, what they are. And I'm going to pose the thought to you that framing climate change as a wicked problem can provide a valuable tool in helping us figure out how to make sense of it and to deal with it. Sort of, once we know what kind of beast we're dealing with, it really does help us figure out what to do. And that will lead into the required interaction or part of the evening where you do some work, where I'm going to be giving you the task of figuring out an action plan to deal with climate change. So we're gonna, and then we'll wrap a few minutes early with some time to talk about honors as well. At any time, feel free to type questions in the chat. Mark will be watching the chat. I will be doing my best to do that too, although I'm also going to be sharing my slide deck. And there's at least one point in the slides where I will be asking a question too. So if you start to drift off, not off, I know it's been a long day, particularly in the East where it's already 6:30. Know that there will be questions that I'll be asking you as we move through the slides. So with that, with no further ado, I'm going to get started sharing my screen of the slide presentation. All right. And in fact, by doing so, let me see if I can still see the chat, make the chat visible, sort of. Let me see if I can put the chat in a place where I can see it. All right. So you're going to see also the transcribing feature, which is kind of neat, and I haven't yet figured out how to turn it off. So I have to be very careful what I say so it doesn't transcribe into something I don't want to say. But anyway, welcome to this presentation, Climate Change as a Wicked Problem. And as I try to do when I give presentations on climate change, I dedicate it to my father. He was actively concerned about climate change back in the 1980s and 90s, before it was really had garnered much attention on the national stage. He actually had an adult education course he ran a couple of times, he created in Delaware to make others aware of and concerned about the issue. And my own experience with climate change goes back to graduate school. I was for a while in a graduate program at Cornell University that was funded by NASA. And we were involved in projects using remote sensing satellite data to monitor melting glaciers as a proxy for climate change. Because at that time, finding signals of climate change was a big deal because they weren't jumping out at us in the news every single day. And there were a lot of people then that were still thinking that's no big deal, or that's 50, 100 years from now. And we're talking about the mid 1990s. So while the understanding of climate science that underpins climate change goes back 100 years or more, the true understanding of the degree of our plight goes back only a couple decades. And it has been building almost exponentially, just as the impacts of climate change have been becoming evident to us almost exponentially. So let me see if I can advance the slides here. Okay, so 3 days ago, the International Panel on Climate Change released its latest report. Maybe you saw it, did make news headlines. The news is not good. And specifically, there were a few things that emerged from the report. The report was overdue. It was supposed to come out in February. Because of COVID, it was delayed considerably. This is a report that comes out every couple of years, basically a status quo on our climate and on climate change. And this is a pretty impressive thing to think about. The last decade was the hottest in 125,000 years. Now, there were anatomically modern humans 125,000 years ago. They were mostly in Africa. They certainly were not in North and South America, nor had we reached Australia yet at that time. And we were hunters and gatherers, small bands of individuals living off the land in very small groups. The population, we're talking about populations. I should have looked this up, but I'm going to guess we're talking about maybe 100,000, probably not even that, human beings on the planet at that point. So it has never been so hot as back then until now. So something to think about. This is a huge jump since the last IPCC report. And I really do want to dwell on it for a minute because it's really powerful. For a long time, climate scientists would say, when asked about, well, there was this hurricane or this hot heat wave right now we're noticing, is that climate change? And they would kind of take a deep breath and say, climate change, climate happens over decades. So in order to see signals of climate change, we need to talk about the decade scales. And weather is the day-to-day phenomenon. And we can say that the general trends of climate change are being matched by what we're seeing in these weather phenomena, but we can't make a one-to-one link. That is over. The scientific community, the climate science community, now has the capacity, the technology to be able to link specific weather phenomena like the recent heat wave in the Pacific Northwest to anthropogenic climate change. The mega drought, which is happening in the Southwest right now, which, by the way, is unparalleled since like 1,500 years ago. You have to go back 1,500 years ago to a drought on the scale of what the what the Southwest is experiencing right now. That mega drought was actually predicted a couple decades ago by climate scientists. Only they said it'll probably arrive by 2050. Here it is, well ahead of schedule. The drought has been going on for 10 years now, and there's no end in sight unless you talk about the bottoming out of major reservoirs across the West. Meanwhile, we have apocalyptic wildfires are now a regular experience. For those of you traveling to the West, I was in Utah just a few weeks ago. Expect that smoky conditions are going to characterize your time outdoors quite a bit of the time. And if you're fortunate, that's all it will be. It won't be a fire that threatens your home, your community. So Lytton, British Columbia, after experiencing 107 degrees, 107 degrees in Lytton, British Columbia, we're talking about north of North Dakota, experienced a horrific wildfire like 2 days later that swept through the community and leveled it. Okay, these kinds of conditions are happening, and now we know climate change is responsible. There's no doubt left. This is another thing to think about that the IPCC report came out with. The range of climate's possible emissions responses has been reduced. What does that mean? Well, climate scientists have also in the past kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit about what our climate's going to do. Well, it's a complicated system, and it is very complicated. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen if we continue to add greenhouse gases at this particular rate or that rate. Okay, if we continue to add carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide to the atmosphere, it's a range of possible outcomes. That range has been narrowed. For those of you that are weather.com junkies like myself, you've probably seen as the drama unfolds of the hurricane marching toward usually Florida, you've seen what they call a cone of uncertainty, which looks a little bit like an ice cream cone. And it's really narrow where the hurricane is. It gets wider as you move along further distance because there's uncertainty in weather prediction about the minutiae of exactly what a hurricane is going to do, or a tropical storm, or whether it will become a tropical storm or hurricane. That is the uncertainty. Okay, it's a visualization for the uncertainty. What we're saying here is that the uncertainty for climate projections going decades into the future, that cone has narrowed. Okay, we're becoming more certain what we're facing, and what is predicted as the worst possible scenario is looking a lot more like the actual scenario. Okay, all right. This is an interesting little scary factor that's emerged. Mark, well put. Touche. This is a really scary thing to think about. Let me explain this, unpack this one as well. The Paris Agreement is basically an agreement, and we're back in it now. Take a moment to applaud that fact that Biden has brought us back into the Paris Agreement. Is an agreement among a bunch of nations to try to keep the total warming from climate change at 2 degrees centigrade or less. Now, I know 2 degrees centigrade doesn't sound like a lot if we translate into our backward American system. Fahrenheit, we're closer to maybe 3.5. That sounds a little worse, but that's average. And we know that things are not like averages. In fact, climate change is more climate destabilization than it is simply climate warming. Warming is part of it, but as there's more energy in the system, okay, there's also more destabilization, and things just get wilder and wilder, okay, as we talk about that warming. So the goal was to hold the warming at 2 degrees C, and we're approaching 1.5 right now. However, the reason things are not worse than they are is because of aerosols, which are particles in the air that are coming from, well, forest fires and, well, fossil fuel burning, okay? If we stop burning fossil fuels tomorrow, everywhere around the world, if you just wake up and there's no gasoline being burned anywhere, no oil, no coal, okay, the air quality is going to get a lot better, right? But it's going to heat up another 0.5 degree. Because if you take those aerosols out of the system, we're already at 2 degrees C. So believe it or not, in the act of making things better for the environment and for us, it's going to temporarily make things worse. Not to mention the built-in inertia that if we change things today, we would continue to see warming for several more years yet, probably a decade anyway, just from the inertia that's in the climate system. Okay? So things are worse than we thought, but they're being masked a bit because of air pollution. Never thought I'd be slightly thankful for air pollution, but it's helping a bit short term. Obviously, that's not a good thing long term. So what are we going to have to do? Well, we're going to have to sequester carbon. We're going to have to use strategies to put carbon back into the ground, which is not necessarily as easy as we'd like it to be. One method actually uses agriculture, farming, to sequester carbon. Regenerative agriculture, it's called. Very interesting. And there are other technologies out there, but none of them are widespread. None of them are big scale yet, and a lot of them require energy too. So, a couple thoughts about this IPCC report. One is that it's based on the consensus of all the United Nations members. So this is about as definitive a statement as we can get. This isn't some sort of strange far left, sign whatever you want, Al Gore fringe group putting out this manifesto. This is a document from a UN organization that carries the authority of all of the nations. They've all agreed on it. And it reflects the consensus of the scientists that have put it together. This is the opening sentence of the IPCC report. It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. If you're looking for a 95% or mostly likely or probably or whatever, they're gone. They're history. Okay? It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Geologists call the time we're living in the Anthropocene. You maybe heard that term. It is a term for a time in Earth's history when we are, like it or not, in the driver's seat. We are controlling the fate of the planet in terms of biodiversity, in terms of air quality, in terms of the climate. That doesn't mean we know what we're doing. It doesn't mean we're steering the ship. It just means that we're left in control of it. We've put ourselves in control of it by our particular decisions we've made, including industrialization. That's a big one. I wouldn't be here today talking about this if it weren't for fossil fuels. So we have to recognize that the mess we're in is also kind of a byproduct of the world we've created, which has a lot of good things to offer in it. So we don't want to just say, well, how crazy we are, but it is time for us to start thinking about the fact that because we're in the driver's seat, we need to take action to deal with this situation and as quickly as possible. So clearly climate change is a problem, but is it a wicked problem? And what does that mean anyway? Well, there are three kinds of problems I'm going to introduce to you today. We're going to talk briefly about two of them and then dwell on the wicked ones. They're the most interesting anyway. Critical problems, tame problems, and wicked problems. So let's take a look at a critical problem. This is a critical problem. This is a taipan. This is the most endangered, not most endangered, most venomous. It's probably not that abundant. I didn't check the numbers, but the most venomous snake in the world. Okay. You do not want to step on the snake. Interestingly enough, in this photograph, the snake is yawning. It's not actually, this is not a threat display, but it doesn't matter. If you come upon a yawning snake like this and it's coiled in your path, in the middle of the path you're walking and you're about to step on it, that is a critical problem. That demands an immediate solution. Okay. If the UAGC LMS goes down, Canvas goes down, that is a critical problem, particularly if you're a student, and you'll find it usually happens when? On Monday evenings. You know, that's the basic, if you graphed the likelihood of systems going down, it's Monday evening. That is a critical problem. Doesn't mean that it's a critical problem the student can address. It's the tech folks, although the student can notify the tech folks, make sure they're aware of it, but it's still something that needs to be dealt with right away. They're usually not totally complicated. Sometimes it's pretty obvious, like if you step aside, you won't step on the taipan, and then the taipan is fine and you are fine and you just continue your walk through the jungle. Sometimes they're more complicated. Let's say you need a new marketing strategy at your company. Well, you need to get a panel of people together and figure it out, right? So that you don't go belly up financially. But still, they're not that complicated, and they're things you do deal with right away in the moment. Tame problems. This is an indecipherable tame problem. From a Unsplash picture somewhere, I think in like Belarus or something like that, a chalkboard. But this is a math problem, or some math problems. I couldn't solve them, but it's still a tame problem. Tame problems are fairly simple. There's a limited range of possible solutions to them. And some tame problems are truly either right or wrong. Like a math problem is usually either right or wrong, right? True or false, okay? Easy. You know you got it right. Also, you know when you got it right, right? You've solved the problem. It's pretty obvious when you've solved the problem, you get to the answer, okay? So tame problems can still involve lots of people. They can still involve the need to work together across a corporation or across a university, or, tame problems are your papers you have to write, papers students write in classes, right? So a lot of problems we encounter are tame. They have clear solution points to them. Wicked problems, on the other hand, are wicked. They are messy, they are complicated, and although we're going to use the word solve sometimes throughout the evening, I try to get away from that word because in point of fact, they're impossible to solve. So, when you kind of see a wicked problem staring you at the face, taking a deep breath and saying, no matter what I do, I'm not really going to solve it, is probably a good place to begin. It's a humble place to begin, but wicked problems are very, very humbling. They're also, by the way, all created by us, right? Wicked problems are things we've done to ourselves. We're going to talk about climate change and why it's a wicked problem in just a moment, but world hunger, poverty, the gap between wealthy and poor, loss of biodiversity, right? Some of them are ecological, environmental. Some of them are social, societal problems. They're all wicked problems. They're big. So the term wicked problem actually goes back to Rutel and Weber in 1973. They were city planners, professors of city planning, actually. So the initial concept of wicked problems was focused around urban planning issues. But they identified a collection of characteristics of wicked problems. And what I'm going to do now is walk through those characteristics with you and pair what climate change is all about with these characteristics. And you'll see how well they match. Wicked problems have no definitive formulation. It's really tough to reduce global climate change to a simple sentence. Okay? There's a lot of things going on with global climate change. Yes, it sometimes gets simplified to we need to stop burning fossil fuels, but it's a lot more complicated. There's cows out there burping methane. There's rice paddies producing methane. There's nitrous oxide coming from our agriculture, from the fertilizers we're using. It's just, there's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of moving parts. And it's really hard to definitively formulate the problem and say, this is the problem. They also have no clear endpoint. I hate to break it to you folks, we're never going to be able to declare climate change solved. Despite the the parade of US presidents I've seen in my lifetime that have declared things like the war on drugs defeated, or whatever other wars they were fighting, war on cancer, I think it was up at one point. These aren't things that are ever going to be won. These are not things that are solved. There's no clear endpoint. Their solutions can only be degrees of good or bad, not true or false. So let's say we're going to shift rapidly away from fossil fuel use. That could be a huge benefit to the environment, but it could devastate the economy. And as we saw, it could even cause temporarily an increase in warming as the aerosols leave the atmosphere. So there's good and bad. It's mixed up in these kinds of things. They're inherently messy because people are involved, and we're just inherently messy beings. You can't test the solution in advance. For all the supercomputer global circulation models out there, they bomb at predicting human behaviors. All they can do is provide different scenarios depending upon different types of human behaviors. But we don't know. So you just got to put the solution into effect, cross your fingers and wait. Solutions are also irreversible. That means that once you put a solution into effect, you're not going to undo it. Let's say we put a carbon tax into effect in the US. Great. Let's say there are some impacts to it. We're concerned about it. Maybe it's a bad idea. We'll withdraw it. The conditions of the country and of the world when we end that carbon tax are different than when we started it. You can't undo what you've done. You can stop it, but it doesn't go back to the point where you were when you started. There are impacts that have occurred from putting that solution into effect, whether the solution is a good one or not. There are vast numbers of approaches and solution strategies possible. So what changes can we all agree on? Do we use nuclear power as a bridge fuel? Maybe we use natural gas as a bridge fuel to help us get to 100% renewable energy. Okay. Each one is unique, but interconnected with a bunch of other ones. I'll give you an image of that in just a couple minutes, but each particular wicked problem is its own monster, but it's tied to a lot of other monsters. So this is where I promised a question. What other wicked problems might you think global climate change is connected to? Anyone want to throw out any ideas about other problems that we're facing that global climate change is connected to? Forest fires, absolutely. The problem of forest fires in the West, absolutely. Earthquakes, not so much. There's some minor impact on earthquakes from climate change, but not really so much. Agriculture, yes. Let's even think further. Producing enough food to feed everybody, right? That there's a wicked problem that is absolutely tied to climate change. Habitat loss, very definitely. All sorts of habitats are getting cooked. And droughts, absolutely. These are great examples. These are wonderful ones. And we can frame those as their own wicked problems. Some of them kind of fitting to climate change overlap, right? But they're all out there, and it's all just this messy entanglement of to try to deal with them all. Health risks, absolutely. Skin cancer, not so much. More that would be more with ozone depletion, but there are obviously big health risks associated. Just heat exhaustion is a real big danger. People just dying of the heat. People in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of them didn't have air conditioning. Who needs air conditioning if you live in Seattle? Air quality, absolutely. Boy, that's a huge one. Okay. So how do you frame a wicked problem? How you do that determines your range of solutions. So let's say we decide fixing climate change starts with each of us. Then the solutions we're going to come up with are going to be very different from the argument that solving climate change begins with fossil fuel companies. Now, you and I know that we're all in this together, but you got to start somewhere. If you're going to frame the problem, you've got to frame it in some way. And how you particularly choose to frame the problem is going to define what your solutions are going to look like. So you can have a whole bunch of people working on the same wicked problem doing entirely different things. So this is the 9th one, and boy, this is a killer. Those tackling a wicked problem are going to be taking the responsibility for what they do. Okay, trying to solve climate change empowers us, right? But it makes us responsible too. Okay, so if you go out and say, I'm going to try to tame this wicked problem, because that's the term we're going to actually use for it, is taming the wicked problem rather than solving. If I'm going to try to tame a wicked problem, I'm going to give you some steps to do that in just a minute. You better well be prepared for scrutiny and possibly bad press, people complaining about what you're trying to do. So what happens when we opt to approach climate change as a wicked problem? How might this classification be helpful? In just a minute, we'll come up with some steps that for solving a wicked problem, see how I slip into that language, taming a wicked problem that can help us figure out how to move forward. But before that, just kind of as a humorous interlude, I decided to go to Unsplash, one of my favorite websites in the world, because you can download all these wonderful, cool, royalty-free images to use in slideshows like this one. And I typed out wicked problem just to see what would happen. And well, this is one thing that came up. And I thought, boy, that's in bad taste about climate change right now with forest fires. Burn your problems. Probably not a good way to deal with climate change. But there you go. I looked around some more on Unsplash and I found Listerine. Now, Listerine does help with many problems we face in our lives, along with duct tape and crazy glue. But I don't think throwing a bottle of Listerine at our climate is going to do much good. So much for Unsplash as a source of all knowledge. If you're hoping to find great photos there, it's great. In terms of knowledge to help you move forward in life, probably not. But I also found this photograph. Now, if we picture this jumble of puzzle pieces, jigsaw puzzle pieces, and we accept that there's more than one jigsaw puzzle represented in this pile, now we've got a pretty good image of a wicked problem. Okay? A jumble of jigsaw puzzle pieces belonging to different puzzles, and they're kind of overlapping. So maybe some of the pieces work in two different puzzles. Wow, that's scary to think about. That is a pretty good visualization of a wicked problem for you. So, how do we approach the wicked problem? Well, fortunately, Bentley and Toth in 2020 put out a book on taming wicked problems, on confronting them, and a chapter where they actually walked you through the steps to do that. And it's actually kind of interesting to think about this approach. So I'm going to give you the approach, and then we're going to put it into action in groups in the remaining, well, not quite the remaining half hour. We're going to have probably about 10 minutes to do a little bit of talking about it in the group. And then we'll have some time for talking about honors. So for those of you that aren't too scared away by wicked problems, there's all sorts more out there waiting for you, and you can learn about them in the honors program. But the first thing Bentley and Toth suggest is this, that you identify a gap between the present state of the problem and some future, more desirable condition. This can be as simple as being in Portland, Oregon, and walking out of your house and saying, it's 105 degrees today. This is ridiculous. I would like it to be the way it used to be, which was temperatures, in the summer, maybe in the 70s and maybe into the low 80s. There's a gap, right? The gap is between how bad things are at the moment and how you'd like things to be in the future. Okay. At this point, you're just recognizing that a gap exists. It's that simple. Climate change, the climate is spinning out of control. It's getting hotter and hotter. There's a gap between things when they used to be even 50 years ago, when, you could kind of, weather varied season to season, place to place, year to year, but it varied in kind of over a kind of a predictable range. And you didn't have these crazy wild outliers that were now becoming commonplace. There you go. There's a gap. So you've identified there's a wicked problem out there. Now this is kind of perhaps immediately obvious, but I think it really is an interesting way to frame what a wicked problem is. It's that gap between what you're experiencing and what you'd like to see. And that leads really well into the second thing. Early on in this process is that you have to own the problem. Okay? With a wicked problem, you're going to have to dig in your heels, because you're going to be battling it to tame it for a long time. And it's going to take a lot of energy and a lot of determination and a lot of collaboration to make any headway at all. And you're not going to solve it anyway. So are you ready to own the problem? So the person that walks out in Portland and says, it's 105 degrees today, shrug their shoulders. Well, I'll put my AC on. Goes back in the house, turns on the AC. No more wicked problem, right? I'll get up, go to work the next day, pretend it doesn't exist. Or this worries me. This is a concern for me. I'm worried about the marine ecosystem. I'm worried about my grandchildren and grandchildren. I'm worried about the fires to my south. This isn't okay. I'm going to take some ownership here. This is going to be a problem I'm going to deal with. I'm going to take responsibility in some small way for, and I'm going to claim it. It doesn't mean everyone else can't claim it too. There's plenty to go around, but it means that you're going to acknowledge that it's something that you're going to work on. So now you go back to that gap and you say, okay, now I'm going to describe the gap between between what I want to see and what we have now. I'm going to describe what are its characteristics. Well, sea levels rising. In the case of climate change, we can talk about sea levels rising, and there's forest fires worsening, and these are all elements of this. And we're seeing the Gulf Stream is actually weakening. We're seeing marine currents in the Atlantic weakening, which could have their own set of dramatic impacts. We're seeing melting permafrost, adding methane, adding more greenhouse gas to the atmosphere, furthering the warming. And you can go on for hours and hours as you describe this, as you begin to kind of enumerate the various tentacles of this particular problem. Next thing to do is to give the problem a name. Now, I know that there are probably, well, we already have a name, climate change. And maybe that's going to be okay. You see how much we've struggled with that, though. First, it was global warming, and now climate change. And I would argue that well, I was going to say just the word, I just missed the word, but discombobulation comes to mind. But climate instability, there we go. Climate instability is another way to name the problem. Or climate destabilization is another way to name it. And obviously, the name we give kind of points the direction we're going in terms of thinking about it, but it's something that we can communicate easily with others. We have to agree on that name. And you see how important that was with climate change, because for a while it was global warming and the emphasis was overwhelmingly on the heat. And people said, wait a minute, sea level's rising. And you know, there's this polar vortex thing, which is making it brutally cold. That's part of it too. That's part of it too. And then we begin to realize, well, global warming isn't a very good thing. Well, we're going to switch to climate change. And even that sounds kind of docile. I think climate destabilization sounds a little bit more intense the way it is. So, okay, this can also take a while. Identify the obstacles we're likely to face along the way to taming the problem. Okay? There are going to be plenty. You know, getting people to agree on certain changes, getting everybody on board, dealing with the fossil fuel companies that have mostly dug in their heels, or they do what's called greenwashing, where they kind of give a little bit of, we're going to go out and plant trees, these kinds of things that, look at all the trees we planted. Well, these are kind of like sleight of hand gestures that are misdirection to steer you away from the actual harm they're doing, right? So recognizing these obstacles and thinking about them political are certainly big ones. Right now with COVID, that's a whole nother kind of obstacle in terms of getting people together and taking action. It's also a distraction. Well, not distraction is the right word. It's a major hindrance, is probably the way to frame it, to dealing with climate when everyday human lives are in danger. That obviously gets precedence. So those are some examples of obstacles. And again, you could spend days or weeks in charrettes with groups of people just enumerating the obstacles. The next step is really, really, really important. Recruit, enlist, and engage others to work with you. There's no such thing as solving a wicked problem on your own. And in fact, for a lot of us going through life, deciding to take some action on wicked problems, step 6 is going to probably look a lot like join an organization that's already moving forward on the issue. Like Citizens Climate Lobby is already lobbying for the House and Senate to take action on climate legislation, right? So you could join that organization and do what they're doing. That's, rather than trying to start your own organization. So, but you need to harness other people. You need to find allies, not only because it's draining to try to tame a wicked problem is very draining. Okay, it's kind of like weeding a patch of kudzu, right? Those of you that are in the Southeast will appreciate this analogy. You can go out there tomorrow and pull all the kudzu out. And you'll be, boy, will you break a sweat in doing that. And then a couple weeks later, it'll be back. There's actually a whole novel, a Japanese novel called The Woman in the Dunes. Bleak existential novel. If you're ever feeling too happy, read Kono Abe's The Woman in the Dunes. This woman lives literally in a hollow in the dunes, and every night the people from the village nearby lower her buckets, and she fills them with the sand, and they pull them up, they dump them out, and then the next day the sand is filling up her home again, and she does it again and again and again. That's kind of what dealing with a wicked problem is. So you need allies to get through it. But you also need allies because there's going to be strength in numbers, and because those of you that have taken Honors 480 know about creativity and innovation. It works really effectively when you're working with other people. Brainstorming. Okay. And finally, as a team, create and implement your action plan. Now you're finally at the point that you can come up with the steps you're going to put into effect. Hopefully, if you know the obstacles, you already know somewhat, what it's going to be like to try to put this plan in effect, and you can maybe plan in advance for at least some of those obstacles, and you can have steps in place. Now, your action plan could go on 1,000 pages and still not end, right? You'd fill the cloud with your action plan. So we know that there's no endpoint. So knowing there's no endpoint, your action plan is going to be to try to have some positive impact. So now it's your turn to tame climate change. Now with wicked problems, there are no right answers. So all we can do is tame it. So one of the things I really like about this particular stratagem, these steps for taming a wicked problem, is that they start with the problem solver, with you and with me. I've had a lot of classes. I teach 207. Mark and I both teach honors, not honors, but SCI 207, our dependence upon the environment. And students in that class, and maybe many of you have taken that course, there's little essays where you're supposed to write about actions you could take in regard to a particular issue. And sometimes, particularly in the first week, a lot of the students will write about things like, well, the government could do this, or if all farmers took up no-till farming, that would solve this problem. That's kind of thinking like you're some sort of deity, right? Controlling the strings. We're just humans. So the steps for taming a wicked problem start with us. So we can't come up with solutions like implement a carbon tax. I can't do that, can you? So maybe we can have an action plan that leads to a carbon tax somewhere down the line, right? But it can't start with that because we don't have the power to do that. So it starts with where we are, right? So with that in mind, we could go through all these steps, and I think that with only 10 minutes about left to do that and 10 minutes for honors, we won't do that. Instead, we're going to jump all the way to 7. We've all recruited, enlisted, and engaged others. The others are all of you. So we're all here. We're a team. We've already named the problem. I'm fine with if you want to agree to call it climate change, or we can call it climate destabilization if you prefer. We've talked a little bit about some of the obstacles. We've talked about some of the aspects of it. And again, we could do that without end, probably. So let's go ahead and talk about how would we implement an action plan? How would we approach climate change as a wicked problem? What are some things we could think about doing? And obviously, there's no right or wrong answer. So whatever you put out there, there can be stages of good and bad. There could be something that just is really bad for the economy or for the planet, but there's no right or wrong because this is a wicked problem. So anybody want to jump in with any ideas? Anything you want? There's, again, no right answer.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well, there's one thing to consider is to prepare people for what is going to happen. And I believe we do have the data to know what's going to take place if climate change keeps getting worse. I mean, we have there are scientists and geologists in Antarctica probably make a fortune drilling holes, but Antarctica's history, it has frozen and defrosted several times, and they do have the timeline for that from those ice cores. Couldn't we compare, to past life in those periods where Antarctica was defrosted and see, the difference in the species that are alive today?
Well, that's an interesting thought. One problem we face with that is that the rate of increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is unparalleled in geologic history, quite frankly. The rate at which the carbon dioxide, we're adding methane, et cetera. So one problem with looking, but even with that, looking at past warming events where there's been widespread melting of ice on the continental ice caps, Greenland and Antarctica, it's rapid. And that's exactly what scientists are finding now. It's very rapid. And one of the things that makes climate change particularly wicked is that it's nonlinear. By that, I mean that you can't project and say, well, the sea level has risen by such and such an amount in the past decade. So a decade from now, it'll be another that much higher. Climate change is devastatingly nonlinear. It is exponential, basically. An example of that from our recent experience is COVID. The spread of COVID is exponential, okay? That's why back when it was first coming on the radar screens, people weren't really worried about it because it was not affecting very large numbers. And for a while, it didn't seem to affect very big numbers. And then it balloons. And that's what climate change is doing too. So it's a little tricky to use the past. We can absolutely use past analogs to get a sense of what's coming. We can certainly get a maximum sea level rise if we melt all the ice out of Antarctica and Greenland. And we also figure in thermal expansion because the water is actually expanding thermally in addition to, and that's actually half the sea level rise is thermal expansion. Those are really horrible scenarios. If you're talking about trying to prepare for those, you're talking about evacuating much of Florida, and forget New York City. You know, that's just going to be a place to go scuba diving, right? So preparing for the worst end member scenario is probably going to be impossible to do without So, but thinking in terms of what's coming in the next couple decades, sure. But even that is, Marathon, which is a community in the Florida Keys, just voted to spend a lot of money elevating their roads. Well, good for them. That will buy them a couple decades. That will not buy them 100 years, right? The Everglades is just about at sea level. It's not going to take much to put the Everglades underwater and to put the Florida Keys underwater, right? So the other problem, and I don't mean to, I'm just kind of riffing on what you shared, that's a particular conundrum of climate change is that the more you try to provide people with scary scenarios about the future, in a lot of cases, the less they are receptive to taking action in the present. It's possible. So what happens is, in fact, climate scientists become accused of being fear mongers because they're spreading all these doomsday scenarios. Well, the doomsday scenarios are kind of what's happening, folks. But that doesn't really empower people either. In fact, one thing about this taming wicked problem, the strategy, is by all of us starting to think about what we can do, we are empowered. And by being empowered, we're able to have forward momentum to bring about change. The danger with overemphasizing what's coming is it can actually disempower people. There can actually be this sort of, you've seen it, those of you that have raised teenagers, you've seen it in your teenagers, this kind of angst-ridden state of, we're all doomed. That kind of condition is not very conducive to solving a wicked problem. So, but what are some things we can do? What are some, I mentioned one, we can join an organization like CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby. I recommend you Google it if you're thinking about, what action can you take? It's actually cool. It's free to join. And they're doing a lot of hard work to try to lobby for a carbon tax. But what are some other things we can do?
I think Alberto had something to say, and I also see that Julia is unmuted.
Great.
But Alberto, you want to go?
Sure. Well, in thinking about this, it seems like we have a very good opportunity here to re-establish the scale of the problem, given this recent OMB report. So I think the very first thing we should all do is one, understand the scope of the issue at hand, and given that understanding, decide how much energy of ours, so our time, money, effort, we are actually going to individually contribute to helping solve this problem. Because we can talk about it all day long, but until we quantify what we're actually willing to give up to solve it, we're not going to move forward.
Excellent point. And that fits in very well with this idea of owning the problem. We have to first be willing to own that it's a problem we're willing to confront. And maybe getting everyone on board even to that step would be a huge step toward dealing with this. If everyone were to say, I recognize that I'm part of the problem and I can be part of the solution, which is true of every wicked problem. We're all parts of the problem and we're all parts of the solution. So.
I find that so fascinating. I just don't see that any, at least from what I read, anything talks about that part of it, about actually quantifying, giving up some of our modern, conveniences to make it happen.
That's a great idea. What would we be willing to give up? I'm reminded of a scene in Schindler's List. Many of you saw a very powerful movie about World War II. and this guy who smuggles Jews out of Germany. And this scene where he realizes for all he's done, he could have done so much more. And he literally holds up this pen and said, "This pen, I could have given up this pen, and I could have then saved another life." You know, and this is someone who did an incredible amount of good for an incredible amount of people. So yeah, what are we willing to give up? How far are we willing to go? And are we ready to commit to that? Do we recognize that level of commitment is required? Mark, I think you said Angelina was going to speak, or was Angelina? Did you have something you want to share?
I can talk.
Okay.
Sorry. So in my experience, a lot of the people that I know personally that don't have a higher education don't fully understand what climate change or climate destabilization even means. My family thinking that because I live in California, Northern California specifically, so I'm thinking back to the Paradise Fire, where a lot of friends and family I know lived up there. So like my family tends to go to the easiest solution. PG&E did that. It's PG&E's fault. And I'm like, no, that's a factor of climate change. It's a factor of climate destabilization. And I remember explaining to my sister that blaming the fires on something like PG&E, blaming the fires on a drought is like wiping the nose of somebody that has pneumonia. You're just treating a symptom. You're not treating the problem. And for me personally, I think the biggest thing on a personal local level would be to educate people. Let them know what is it that you're trying to tackle and what can you personally do that can help, because seeing climate change as this huge monstrosity weighing over everybody, you start to get this crippling depression of there's nothing I can do. We're all just going to die, you know, and taking that away from people and letting them know you can do something, you can fight this. It just will be on a much smaller scale.
But collectively can be very powerful. Those of you that have taken 207, you've seen with your footprint reduction project. Yeah, it's not very much you're doing, but if your whole neighborhood starts doing that, it starts to add up. So absolutely enlisting others and making them aware. One challenge, psychologists have identified this phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is basically that paradoxically, those that know very little about a particular subject are not aware of how much they don't know, so they actually think that they're experts on it. It's kind of a fascinating paradox, but it definitely plagues climate science. There are a lot of individuals that either try to still argue that the climate change isn't actually occurring, or that we're not responsible, or it's not so big of a deal. But they don't actually have the knowledge about the issue, but they think they do. So it makes it very difficult to actually educate, to share with them, because you hit this wall of, well, I already know. And that's a very challenging, talking about obstacles, identifying obstacles, getting around the Dunning-Kruger effect, getting to people that think they already know everything about the subject is very challenging. If nothing else, climate change is humbling to me. The more I know about it, the more I realize it's very, very complicated. And I'll never really fully understand all that's going on and all that could happen. So it's amazing that climate scientists have made such progress as they have.
Sorry, I just wanted to touch on something somebody had said in chat. They'd mentioned like high school programs. Like I'd done something similar when I was in 6th grade. We started learning about ecosystems and environments, and learning about the 3 R's, the reduce, recycle, reuse. And I know that plenty of people have used the excuse, well, I recycle, so I'm helping, but not understanding that, well, that's cool and all, but don't burn trash in your yard, maybe. Stuff like that, where they'll just assume that the small thing they're doing is all they can do to help, and letting people know that there's so much more that they could do just on their personal level.
Yeah. Great point. I'd love to see every school across the country having a class on our environmental future, focused particularly on climate change, but biodiversity too. That's in a state of crisis. and just trying to raise awareness and then empower, ideally empower. It's like you can make choices. You can choose whether to buy a product that has palm oil or not. Palm oil plantations in Indonesia are replacing the rainforest. So if you're not buying environmentally friendly sourced palm oil, I think there is a label that you can look for about that. But if you're buying any product with palm oil, which is something like a third, I'm just wildly guessing, a quarter of the products on our supermarket shelves seem to have palm oil in them. I just bought some organic peanut butter and there's palm oil. I didn't know it. I grabbed it off the shelf. There's palm oil on it in it. So becoming aware of that, then we can make a choice not to buy those products or make a choice to write to the brands we like and encourage them to just use the palm oil that's ecologically sourced. Coffee, we can make a choice to buy shade grown, fair trade, organic, right? So we do have choices we can make in our lives that can impact broadly. And those are just consumer ones. There's plenty of others. Well, I know we're down to 7:27. We have technically only 3 minutes left. And I definitely wanted to have some time for, we're going to stay late. I'll certainly will, and to answer questions from honors. But I just want to say how much I enjoyed this opportunity to share this with you today. And thank you so much. I hope you found it of interest. And on that note, I'd love to take any questions or thoughts about honors, and Mark will as well. We have a little slide presentation on honors too, but I know we're just about out of time. So if you have any questions, feel free to share them. And again, thank you all so much for joining us for this roundtable. It's been a delight to talk with all of you.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I don't think we need the slide presentation. I'm sure anybody who's here, they probably got the link and maybe have been to the honors website. Also, I will post before anybody leaves, we have the link if you are in the honors program and you're either intending to or already part of the new program. This is the link to the self-reporting survey that you attended this session, and you just fill out some information so that there's a record, so that when you accumulate 15 hours of participation, you can get that one free elective credit through the honors program. And that's one of the benefits. If you're not in the honors program, in the new honors program, you are expected before you graduate to attend and participate in 15 hours of these types of activities, both that we put on and that might be from outside sources, other internal UAGC groups or presentations or organizations that we kind of co-sponsor or curate as the honors program, or different clubs. Clifford runs a monthly science book club.
Monthly, resuming in September, science book and film club. We're going to be reading a book called Pandora's Lab in September. We're going to be watching Farley Moat's Never Cry Wolf in October. So it's going to be an alternating book and film club. Every other month we'll watch a movie, and not during the club meeting. You're going to have to do that on your own. We'll come and talk about it. And there's honors live learning sessions beginning next month. And there's a slew of them, and those are all posted in an announcement and in the honors learning community. So if you're not spending time in the honors learning community, get over there, because there's a lot of information. And yes, the book and film club is in UAGC Connect. You're welcome to sign up, to go there and sign up and join in. I'm always happy to recruit new members for that event.
Yeah, and there are other clubs, like there's Toastmasters group at UAGC. There's also Champs Mentoring. All of those things, you can use those hours as long as you're only using it. Like if you're in Champs already and intending to get a PLA credit through just Champs, then you can't double count it. But if you want to participate in Champs just for 5-8 hours, you could use that for some of your hours for honors as well. But yeah, is anybody here interested in honors and had any additional questions or about how the process worked? So Julia's interested. Luke?
Feel free to ask questions.
What's all available in I understand there's 4 classes that you take that are mandatory, but what else does honors have? What do you have to do?
There's actually joined. There's actually 3 classes, not 4. It's 270, 280, and 490. And then there is the expectation of 15 hours of co-curricular, attending co-curricular or leading co-curricular events like this one, like the Honors Live Learning that happens twice a month, like a lot of the clubs at UAGC, like Champs, right? And that is it. Those are, and then there's an honors learning community, where all those events are listed and where you can meet and network with other honors students. So that's a unique space to the honors community. And those are really the big, and then just all the various programming events that we offer. But those are the only obligation related to that is the 15-hour PLA credit. So those are the two requirements.
And if you complete the 3 courses and earn the 1 free elective credit by participating in the 15 hours of these types of activities, which there will be at least 1 or multiple every month. So there will be opportunities to get those hours in and through the other clubs. Then if you complete that, then you will get honors designation on your diploma. Also, when you're enrolled in the honors program, there are specific honors advisors that will help you with, your normal scheduling and course load and academic questions, or, course related questions, and also honors related questions. And of course, Clifford and I are faculty mentors in the program, so we're also at your disposal to help with honors or other questions.
And I manage the learning community. So if you come in and say hi, I promise to say hi back. I encourage you to come show up and post a greeting there.
Stephanie, you and also, so Alberto, wait. Few people had questions though about yes, Alberto, were there still 2 levels 3 classes versus 6 classes? That was the old system. If you enrolled prior to July 1st of this year, you can continue with whatever your initial plan was. All the 6 courses will continue to be offered. Or if you choose, you can switch over to the new program and then meet the new requirements. So if you've already done, say, like 2 out of the 3 courses, or if you've already done the 3 that are now required in the program, then you wouldn't need to take any more if you want. But if you still want to take all those courses, you can still stay enrolled in the way that nobody is forced to switch over to the new program, but you have that option if you want. So yeah, if you're signed up for the 6 and you want to take them all, they'll still be offered. And if you just want to switch to the new program, you can do that too. The 15 hours is, yes, just before graduation. I think you have to get it completed like a month or 2 before graduation just to verify. And it's self-reported. We've had some students ask about other activities, and we're going to have a process if there's something like outside of the university. The requirement will just be that it somehow aligns with the 4 core pillars of the honors program, which are innovation and creativity in solving problems, global issues and perspectives, civic engagement, and what's the first one?
Did you mention leadership?
Leadership, the easiest one. Yeah, somehow I just blanked on that one. So if there's something that we're not specifically saying you can participate in, but something that is either in your own community or your own life that is something that you're not counting for another thing, like it's not volunteer hours for another organization or your business, your job. If it's just something totally separate, then you could run that by us, and we'll have a process for either approving or not approving that to count towards your honors 15. Shaylee, can I enroll if I've already satisfied my gen ed requirements, including electives? You may, but that means that you would potentially be taking 3 more courses than you would need to graduate with your degree. So that might change how appealing it is to you. I did have some other students who said that they had all their electives and their gen ed courses, but with whatever situation they had, maybe their employer was willing to, pay for a certain amount of classes, and they still had room in that they were like, yeah, I'd like to take those classes. But I certainly know that, when you're weighing everything, that might change your opinion. If you are still showing up on the qualified list, you will still get invites, because every month we basically get a list of students and we just sort it based on GPA. And if you're over the requirement, then you'll get an email. And apologies if you don't like getting those emails every month. If you don't want them, you can always add my email to your block list. But as long as you're qualified, even if you're not officially enrolled in honors, you'll get those invites into some of these events, and you're still more than welcome to join us, even if you don't choose to join the honors program. We just like having, the really high achieving, dedicated to education and critical thinking and the ideals of the honors program. We just love gathering students like you here together to discuss and talk about important topics and expand hopefully the value that you're getting from your degree program here at UAGC. What are the internal KPIs for the honors program? Wow, that is a good one. We have a vision statement and a mission statement, which I could probably pull up for you if you're interested. But as far as key performance indicators, I mean, right now internally, we're just looking at, enrollment, how many students are enrolling, and then I guess mainly qualitative data and feedback from students about what they enjoy and what they'd like to see in the honors program. But that is a good point that maybe we should actually have some measurable KPIs. So thanks for that idea, Alberto. But yeah, mainly, we look at enrollment and then like student satisfaction measurements. So yeah, thanks for coming, Shaylee.
So I could just speak my question, I guess. So in addition to that, I'm trying to figure out if this is a great place to spend my time, right?
Right.
And that's what we're all trying to determine here. And so the flip side of that is, well, there are a couple pieces. Obviously, personal development in engaging with the program.
Mhm.
Then after school, what is the value of this honors program versus not having it through a UAGC education? And thirdly, what do you intend for me to get out of it, and is that measurable? So if you could address any of that at all, that'd be great.
Well, I'll chime in, Alberto, by sharing this, that the courses that you take in the honors program really go a step beyond, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Go a step beyond probably all the other courses you're going to have while you're at UAGC. Most of the courses, in my experience, I've seen, culminate in getting some learning, some knowledge, and then demonstrating it with a presentation or a paper. Two of the classes already now, one in the version that's just been redesigned, and the other one already. Two of the three classes already culminate in students taking action. So in Honors 270 in the redesigned form, which is going to go live in a few months. So if you take it before then, the course is a little different. But in the new form, the students are going to be, or you look at a particular global issue and you look at it applying the tools of critical thinking. So you're revisiting critical thinking, rhetorical devices, bias, arguments, formulating arguments. But now you're doing it with a particular environmental issue. You're looking at different sides of that issue. And then you're formulating an action that you're going to take to support your particular position on that issue. And then you're taking that action all in the course. So the course kind of starts in the academic realm and culminates in the world, out in the world, doing something. 280 is somewhat similar. You study the theme of civic responsibility. You look at government, particularly national government, and the nature of the branches of government, in particular in the context of a chosen issue that you're going to focus on in the course. And then you develop a plan to take action on that issue. Then you take the action, implement it, and report back. So again, they're a little bit more geared toward moving from thinking to doing. I guess I would put it that way. And that's also the spirit behind the co-curricular PLA component, is that you're moving beyond just thinking about the conventional classroom where you're having readings and watching videos and such to interdisciplinary, richer kinds of dialogues and experiences where you can potentially take a lead. For instance, you could decide with the book, I'll use my book group as an example. As an honor student, you can reach out to me and say, Clifford, I'd like to lead the next book group. Here's a book I'd like to do. Great. If you lead an event for the book group, you get 3 times the hours. So instead of a 1 hour book group for your PLA credit, you'll get 3 hours of PLA credit toward the 15 hours you need for leading that book group. So you could actually do that. So you can get experience with leading. You could speak at some sort of roundtable and get experience doing that as well. So it's a little bit more geared toward action than just strictly kind of academic research and thinking. Does that make sense?
It does. That was very helpful. Thank you.
I will also say that, a big focus, obviously the 4 core pillars of the honors program that I mentioned before. And then we have students from all different programs. It's very interdisciplinary. We have people with different perspectives, different life experiences, different professional goals, different knowledge base. And we all get together, and what unites all the students here is that they're academic achievers. They're doing really well in their classes. They are putting in the effort. They are thinking critically, and we're getting them all together and then, talking about some of these big issues and how they're connected to all these many different disciplines and aspects of our society, not just climate change. That's, clearly was the focus this month's. Next month it will be a different topic, and moving forward, all of the roundtable series is something that we do, and we are going to continue to develop and do other events again, and also share and encourage honor students to go as groups to other internal events or external talks that are going to be held online and free, maybe at other universities or other speakers on key issues and topics. And then we're going to get together and discuss, the implications and how that relates to all of our majors and professions and all of that. So
Angelina, thank you for chiming in with a couple things about the class sizes tends to be smaller, and they're more, I agree with you, Angelina, the discussions, boy, it blows me away, the depth, the level, a lot of the students really engage. So you're engaging with a bunch. Maybe you'll have a class where there'll be 1 or 2 other students that will kind of go that extra mile or really explore the next level, take the topic to the next level. Imagine being in a class where almost everybody's doing that all the time. It's in one way, it's kind of humbling, but another way, you really get to be pushed. You get to find a challenge. If you're finding the regular classes are, you're getting what you need, but you're not really feeling very challenged or jazzed, I think it will bring in another level of challenge. I think that's a huge intrinsic motivator there. There's also the live learning events, which are kind of running in tandem starting next month, which reflect collaboration. There's going to be 2 faculty at each one, and they're going to be kind of playing off each other. So it'll be kind of like what you saw tonight, only 2 faculty that'll be leading a discussion together. And they're coming from very disparate areas. So we're actually modeling that kind of interdisciplinary collaboration. So collaboration is a much bigger problem solving. I think, though, is really, if I were going to wrap it all up, I'd say honors is about taking on wicked problems. Let's take on the world, and let's make a difference in our precious life on it. Let's get out there and do something. And I think that spirit is a big part of the honors program.
Julia, did you go ahead?
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to call on you because I saw your hand up and you're unmuted, so I wanted to acknowledge. Yep.
So my questions are a little bit more technical. Are the honors classes going to be intermingled like in between our current classes, or will we be taking them alongside our current classes? And then how will we actually sign up? The initial email was just a link to the Zoom meeting. I don't remember getting one that was like, click here to actually fill out your application.
Sure. So the honors courses will just get scheduled just like your other regular courses. So I think some students can elect to take more than one at a time, but the usual standard practice is that you just take one course at a time. So, if you're taking gen ed or a major course, then as it opens up in your schedule and as that course, the honors course is being offered, you'll get scheduled for that, just as you would any other course. So it's not like it's not going to necessarily get stacked up. You're not going to be doing 2 at once. There is a link, and if you search also UAGC honors program, there's the UAGC honors. Just going to pull it up. There's the page, and at the bottom, basically you log into your student portal, and the instructions are at the bottom of this page about how to find the honors application. it can be a little tricky, I guess. We can't see what you see as a student when you are in the student portal and looking at the student documents. So if you have trouble finding the application, you can also reach out to your current academic advisor and they should be able to provide it for you. Or if you want to email Clifford or I, we'll put our emails in here. We could email you the application as well. And then you're just going to submit it to, you're going to fill it out. There used to be other requirements, but basically there's just a short essay and information. And then you email it to UAGC honors at uagc.edu. So that's where you would email the application. But yeah, at that UAGC honors website, at the bottom of the page, it has instructions like log into the portal, click on this, and then you should be able to find the application that way. But you can also email myself or Clifford.
I know it's under my forms you go to.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for all those great questions. And yeah, I think we really summed up by some of the key values and things. And it's just it's things like this, and it's, you know, the new program, the newly redesigned, re-envisioned program, which we had faculty from all over the university contribute and give their input on what would be a great experience for our most high achieving students at the university. And we're going to just continually be expanding and doing more events like this, and really listening to feedback from our honor students about what they want to see as well, and what they want to participate in and talk about, because it's really just about getting this exceptional group of students together and then talking, and as Clifford said, solving problems and talking about the big issues. So do you have anything else, Clifford? If not, we can probably.
I think I'm out of words of wisdom for the evening. Thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate your time this day. And if you have any questions or want to follow up with me about anything about climate or wicked problems, feel free to email me at clifford.blizard@uagc.edu. That's clifford.blizard, 1 Z, not 2. And thank you all so much. And I hope to see you in an honors class. Some of you I already am. And Mark, I'm sure, feels the same. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. And thank you all so much.